Hi, guys. Welcome to a new month. It's now August, and we are still talking about David. Remember, 2 weeks ago, we had a story where Samuel, who's a prophet of God's, who hears God's voice and does what God asks him to. So, 2 weeks ago, Samuel was told by God to go and find a new king because at the time, Saul was the king and he was doing bad stuff. God was not happy with Saul, so he said, we've got to look for a new king to get ready for when Saul is gone. So remember, Samuel went into Bethlehem and he went to Jesse, who had a whole bunch of sons. And Jesse brought the first son, who was very strong and good looking, and God said, mm-mm. And then he brought another one that was very big and strong. God said, mm-mm. And God waited until Jesse brought the little boy David in from the field with the sheep. And he said, that's the one, because David has got the heart to be a king in my name. Because Saul was not doing a good job. He wanted a good-hearted king like David. So this week's story picks up where David now is a grown man, and it's time for him to be king. Let's listen. A shepherd boy grows up to be king. From 2 Samuel chapter 5. King Saul and his son Jonathan had died in battle. Now the people of Israel did not have a king. The leaders of Israel came to David because they wanted him to become their king. God has called you to be our king, the leaders said. You will look after our people just as a shepherd looks after the sheep. You will be our king. David remembered the day his father, Jesse, had called him in from the fields. He recalled how the prophet Samuel had poured oil over his head and told him that one day he would be king. David knew that becoming king of Israel was the right thing to do, and so David said yes. David was crowned king of Israel before all the people at Hebron. One day, not long after he became king, David prayed to God. He thought about his life and everything that had happened. He remembered his days as a shepherd, carefully watching over his sheep. And David remembered the day he fought the giant Goliath. He knew that God had protected him. He thought about his friendship with Jonathan, his friend who had helped him escape from King Saul. He recalled the days he had spent running from King Saul. God looked after him every step of the way. All those years of waiting, David exclaimed. God helped me every step of the way. Now I am ready to be king. David gave thanks to God for everything that God had done. He promised to serve God, and then he praised God's greatness.
I will praise you, God. There is no one like you. You have given us a land where we can live in peace. You love us. You are most powerful, and I can trust you.
David reigned over the people of God for many years. He was a strong and wise king who loved God. What did you think? That story, David was thinking back of some things that happened in his life. One story that we didn't talk about this summer was David and Goliath, the big giant that David took and defeated with his slingshot, like he used to practice when he was a boy shepherd. You might ask your parents to read that story to you from the Bible. David goes on to be king of Israel for a long time. And for the most part, he's a very good king. But David makes some mistakes, just like everybody makes mistakes. And he and God have a close relationship, and God helps to guide King David. Now, I have something I want you to do by next week. Okay, something we didn't talk about very much, but we will next week, is that David was a very good musician. I told you there were lots of stories in the Bible about David as a young person and as an older person and as king. Well, throughout that whole time, lots of times you'll see pictures of David with a harp, the stringed instrument that we saw in today's lesson. And David wrote a lot of books in the Bible. And I'm not going to tell you where they are. I want you and your parents to try to figure out where those books are in the Bible. And a hint is that David was a talented musician. He wrote a lot of songs that are in the Bible. Now, it's not called the Book of David. It's not called Songs David Wrote. It's called something else. So I want you to work with your parents and see if you can find that by next week. Have a good week and don't go out in this hot weather.